Back, and I hope that you guys are ready for another exciting tutorial on how to texture our Crayola crayon. Now, this particular crayon was a revolved shape. We use a curve to create it, and what we need to do is separate the center part of our Crayola crayon so that we can apply a texture that we find online. First thing that we need to do is assign it a material. So we will right mouse click and hold, assign new material, click on the Arnold, find the AI standard, and I'm going to rename this to Crayola. Press return key, and that's good with me. Now the next thing I need to do is make sure that this Crayola crayon has the right attributes of a crayon. It looks waxy, and the texture we'll worry about a little later. So in my perspective view, I'm going to press F and focus in on my Crayola. So we're using the Arnold shader. Okay, let me just assign a material to this guy, just so that it doesn't have that really weird yellow. Alright, so I'll go to my Arnold view, render view, and let's see, let me change this to perspective. Now, probably need to add an area light so we could see exactly what we're doing, and I'm going to add a sky dome light, which is another way of indirect lighting. I'm not going to worry about applying an image to this right now, but let's see if we can get something a little different. Alright, perfect. So we're starting to see a little bit more light coming into our scene. What I want to do is actually increase the exposure to value of 2, and that will allow me to actually see what I'm working on. So I zoom in a little bit closer, and I want this to be a little waxy, so I'm going to select my object, and with Arnold Render it's actually really cool. You can click on the render view and it selects the object, the geometry. So I click on this wall and you can see how it lights up in my scene. Okay, so with that selected, I'm going to go over to my Crayola, and I want to increase the specularity. So with that being said, I'll turn on the weight, and what's actually happening is becoming much more specular. And if I change the angle up, you can see that this really glossy or specular edge is being reflected onto my geometry. It's very saturated. So what I want to do is maybe dial that down a little bit by clicking on the roughness and bringing it to the left. Now the lower the roughness, you're going to notice that it looks very strange, right? The color, the way the light is reflecting off of this looks very strange, kind of like chrome. If I bring the roughness to the far right, well, now it's going to take on a different property. It's going to reflect light a little bit different. Okay, maybe if I change the color of my diffuse to, let's say, red, and kind of make it a little darker red, so we could see the way that the light is bouncing off of this object. So it has a really soft kind of, it's extremely rough in terms of surface quality, which we could relate to sandpaper. And when we made the weight, I'm sorry, the roughness of our specularity at a lower value, it looked like chrome. So I'm going to try to find a value that looks like it's still a little reflective and it doesn't look like sandpaper. Okay, so starting to look a bit closer to what I want. Now my diffuse weight is at 0.7, and you're probably wondering, well, why is my color red, but in my viewport here, on my render view, it looks pastel-y. It's because we need to increase the weight of our diffuse, and hopefully we'll get something a bit closer to that value there. I'm going to click on the color and increase the V value, and I should get something a bit darker. It doesn't look like red. I'm going to drag this all the way to the right. Again, when you're doing look development or trying to make your image look hyper realistic or extremely cartoony, you're going to be changing things in your diffuse, your specular, and sometimes even your refraction, which has everything to deal with glass. So your refraction, your reflection, your specular, and your diffuser, all different ways of making this particular geometry look and feel like the actual material that you're going for. So we're trying to get a waxy plastic feel. Okay, so back to the specular. I think I want to dial it down just a little bit more, 0.7, and I'm going to zoom in a little closer. Alright, so while we're waiting for this image to get clear, I'm looking at the way our brightest spot on this object appears, and this region here is white, kind of splotchy because of the final resolution, but I actually like that. I think this looks really nice. Okay, so I'm going to close my render view, and I need to separate the wrapper. Okay, so the wrapper on this particular shape starts right at this edge here. So what I'm going to do is go to my front view. I'm going to right mouse click and hold, select face, and I'm going to zoom in very close. Highlight this section of the wrapper, and I go back into my perspective. I'll press spacebar. Okay. So I don't want to go around and highlight this entire edge. So if I press and hold shift and then press the period button, you can see that it grows the selection, and I'll press period one more time. Alright, so it selected that ring here, and not only did it select that ring at the top, but it also selected the bottom part of your Crayola crayon. Now, what I am going to do is go back into my front view, I'll zoom out, and go to the bottom part of my crayon. I'm going to hold shift and make a selection of that. Now I know that this section I don't want because it's part of the actual wax. So I'll hold shift and I'm going to deselect that section. So now you can see, voila, that's what I have. Alright, so I'm going to click on UV. Actually, let's go to Edit Mesh, and then we're going to click Extract. So now we have two different pieces of geometry. So I right mouse click and hold, and you can see we have this part of our geometry. Now my move tool, my manipulator tool, is all the way down here. So I want it to be right in the center. So I go to Modify Center Pivot. Perfect. And then you can see that this is my Crayola, the wax, and this is the paper. Alright, so a little bit of internet research to find the wrapper. So I'll type in Crayola texture. And I'll go to Images. And maybe if I type in something more specific, Crayola texture map. And let's try different Crayola texture. Let's try something different. Crayola seamless texture. Let's see if that works. Okay, it didn't. Alright, so let's try Crayola. Let's try Crayon texture. And scroll through. I'm starting to get something a little closer to what I want. Crayola paper texture. Let's try that. Alright. Oh look, there we go. There's one. Alright. So I will right mouse click and hold. Save image as. I'll save it to my folder, my project folder. And Crayola paper underscore diffuse. Save. And now I'm going to right mouse click and hold, assign new material to the paper. And I'll click on the Arnold AI standard. Call this Crayola paper. And I'll click on the diffuse, the checker box to the right of it, the inputs. Find the word file. I'll look for the file that I just saved. Press open. And press 6 on my keyboard. Nothing happened. So let's go to Crayola paper. Looks like it didn't want to assign it, so I'll go back to that same texture. And I'll look for my Crayola paper. And so it doesn't look good right now because the texture is stretched. So I'll go to UV cylindrical mapping. And there we go, we could see it. Now our cylindrical mapping, we're going to change the projection horizontal sweep from 180 to 360. And there we go. Right mouse click and hold, object mode. And so there we go. Now you might be able to find a better image of the Crayola than I found, but I'm happy with that. I'll go ahead and stop this and hope that you guys enjoyed this tutorial. Again, you can find better images online of the Crayola. So I hope that you guys enjoy this. I'll give you one last render. And we can change a few things up on the quality of our paper. It should look very diffused. Maybe we can dial down the specular weight from 1 to maybe 0.8. Alright, so I would just kind of change these values up accordingly to your taste. Alright, still very bright, but let's try a value of 0.4. Maybe make it a little bit, or make it more diffuse. And so now you can see that the influence of that, the white color is not as great as it was before. It's actually looking closer to the red. And again, you can select your paper and increase the specularity if you wanted to, maybe a lower value, 0.1. And you start to see a little bit of reflectivity on that paper. If the paper is wax paper, then it should have a slight reflective tint. But if you want it to have that kind of sandpaper feel to it, then we increase the roughness to a larger value, maybe something like 0.8. And it has a different quality to it. So with that being said, I'm going to stop this tutorial, and I'll see you in the next tutorial, which will be texturing our Voss bottle.